Very urgent. Your soulmate needs you tonight. Before they make a decision, they'll never tell anyone. Don't scroll, listen carefully, because this fictional story begins on a night when one quiet decision has the power to change everything that follows. My beloved child, this is not a prediction about your life. It is a story about courage, honesty, healing, and the choices that shape who we become. Stay with this story until the very end, because every chapter connects to the next in ways you may not expect. And if you enjoy stories filled with hope, emotional growth, and meaningful life lessons, take a moment to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter of this journey. Now, let your mind become still and listen. The night had already settled over the city. Streetlights reflected softly on rain-covered roads, the wind moved gently through the trees, and most homes had already turned off their lights. Yet inside one quiet apartment, someone remained awake. Their phone rested on the table beside a warm cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. They had looked at the screen dozens of times, opened several conversations, typed countless messages, and deleted every one of them before pressing send. Their heart carried a burden no one else knew existed. To everyone around them, they appeared calm, responsible, and confident. They smiled during conversations, completed every responsibility, and laughed when expected. But beneath that peaceful appearance lived a question that had quietly followed them for months. Every evening it returned. Every silent moment gave it another opportunity to grow. They could no longer ignore it. Listen carefully, because this story is for you. My beloved child, there are moments when life quietly asks us to make a choice that no one else can make for us. Not because the world is demanding an answer, but because our own heart has become tired of living between truth and silence. Tonight had become that moment. They knew a decision was waiting. They also knew that if they made it without speaking honestly first, they might spend years wondering what could have happened if they had found the courage to express what truly lived inside their heart. Earlier that day they had attended an ordinary meeting at work. People discussed schedules, deadlines, and future plans. Everything seemed completely normal until a colleague casually announced they had accepted an opportunity to move far away. Everyone congratulated them warmly. The room filled with smiles and excitement. Yet something unexpected happened inside your soulmate. They suddenly imagined what it would feel like to disappear from someone's everyday life without ever telling them how deeply they had been appreciated. That simple thought followed them home like a quiet shadow. Don't scroll. Your heart needs this right now, because after returning home they opened an old wooden drawer searching for a notebook where they usually wrote daily reflections. Instead they found something they had completely forgotten, a folded piece of paper tucked carefully beneath several old photographs. Curious, they unfolded it. The handwriting immediately looked familiar. It wasn't a long letter. It contained only a few simple lines. Never wait until goodbye to tell someone they mattered. They froze. They remembered the day those words had first been written. Years earlier someone had shared that reminder during an ordinary conversation. At the time it sounded like gentle advice. Tonight it felt like a message arriving exactly when it was needed most. They quietly whispered, "Have I been waiting too long?" My beloved child, sometimes one forgotten sentence returns at exactly the right moment because we have finally become ready to understand it. Listen carefully, because this story is for you. They carried the note toward the window and looked out across the quiet city. Memories began returning one after another. They remembered someone who celebrated their smallest victories with genuine happiness. Someone who listened without interrupting. Someone who encouraged them during seasons when self-doubt felt impossible to escape. Someone who gently reminded them that kindness should never depend upon convenience. They realized something surprising. The greatest influence in their life had never come through dramatic moments. It had been built slowly through ordinary conversations filled with patience, honesty, and quiet encouragement. As the hours passed, they opened the notebook they had originally been searching for. Across one empty page they wrote a single question. What decision am I really afraid to make? They stared at the words for several minutes. Then they finally answered. I'm afraid of telling the truth because I don't know what tomorrow will bring. The honesty of that sentence immediately brought unexpected peace. Don't scroll, because this next part matters. If this fictional story is speaking to your heart, subscribe and join us for future chapters filled with hope, reflection, and meaningful journeys. There are many more stories waiting to remind us that courage often begins with one honest conversation. Now stay with me, because the most important part is only beginning. They continued writing. What if they don't feel the same? What if I've misunderstood everything? What if speaking honestly changes our friendship forever? Question after question filled the page until there was no empty space left. Finally, after reading everything they had written, they smiled gently. Another question quietly appeared inside their heart. What if silence changes everything instead? That single thought became impossible to ignore. Listen carefully because this story is for you. My beloved child, real courage rarely arrives because fear disappears. It arrives because something more important than fear finally speaks louder. They realized they were no longer afraid of hearing an honest answer. They were afraid of spending years wondering what might have happened if they had never spoken at all. The clock quietly reached 11:30. They stood up, walked toward the bookshelf, and removed a small photo album they had not opened in years. Inside were ordinary pictures, friends laughing during simple gatherings, family celebrations, peaceful walks, birthdays, sunsets, and handwritten notes tucked between photographs. Every page reminded them of one truth. Life is not remembered through perfection. It is remembered through people. Through conversations. Through kindness. Through moments that almost seem too ordinary to notice while they are happening. My beloved child, tears slowly formed in their eyes, not because they felt hopeless, but because gratitude had finally become stronger than hesitation. They quietly picked up their phone once again. This time they didn't begin typing immediately. Instead, they opened the contact they had looked at countless times before. They smiled softly. I think it's finally time. Their fingers moved slowly across the screen. There's something important I've wanted to tell you for a long time. They stopped. Deleted it. Started again. I hope I'm not interrupting your evening. Deleted it. Started once more. Finally they placed the phone down and laughed quietly. No. This conversation deserves more than a message. My beloved child, the decision they almost made tonight was not about walking away. It was not about giving up. It was about leaving everything unsaid forever. And for a few painful hours, they truly believed silence would be easier. But then they remembered every lesson life had quietly taught them. Gratitude should never be postponed. Respect should always be spoken. Kindness should never remain hidden. Honesty should arrive before regret. Those lessons changed everything. Just after midnight, they reached for their coat. They made one final decision. Instead of sending another message, they would speak face to face. They quietly locked the apartment door behind them and stepped into the cool night air. The streets were almost empty. The city felt unusually peaceful. Every step carried them closer to a conversation they had postponed for far too long. But, my beloved child, just as they reached the end of the street, their phones suddenly vibrated. A message appeared from the very person they were about to visit. The screen displayed only one sentence. I don't know why, but tonight I feel like I really need to talk to you before I make a decision that could change everything. Your soulmate stopped walking. Their heartbeat became louder than the silence around them. Because for the first time, they realized they were not the only one carrying an important truth through the night. And what they would discover during that unexpected meeting would completely change the reason behind the decision neither of them had yet revealed. Don't scroll, listen carefully because this fictional story is about to reach the conversation that neither of them expected to have tonight. Your heart needs this right now. My beloved child, your soulmate remained frozen beneath the glow of the streetlight, staring at the message that had just appeared on the phone screen. They read it once. Then again. I don't know why, but tonight I feel like I really need to talk to you before I make a decision that could change everything. Those words echoed through the silence around them. Only moments earlier they had been walking toward that very person, believing they were the only one carrying an unspoken truth. Now they realized something extraordinary. Two hearts had independently reached the same conclusion on the same night. Neither of them knew what the other was about to say, yet both had quietly decided that silence could no longer remain part of their story. They quickly replied, I'm already on my way. The response came almost immediately. I'll be waiting where we always found peace. Your soulmate instantly knew the place. It was a quiet lakeside park on the edge of the city where they had once spent an afternoon talking about dreams, fears, and the kind of people they hoped to become someday. It wasn't famous. There were no crowds. Just a wooden bench overlooking calm water, surrounded by tall trees that whispered gently whenever the wind passed through them. Somehow, every important conversation between them had found its way back to that peaceful place. Listen carefully because this story is for you. My beloved child, as they drove through nearly empty streets, countless memories quietly returned. They remembered the first time they had visited that park together. They remembered laughing over simple things that now felt priceless. They remembered encouraging one another during difficult seasons without realizing those ordinary conversations would someday become life-changing memories. Looking back, they understood that the strongest connections are rarely built through dramatic events. They grow quietly through consistency, trust, respect, and the willingness to keep showing up when someone needs you most. Don't scroll. Your heart needs this right now because when they finally arrived, they noticed someone already sitting on the old wooden bench, looking out across the still water. The moon reflected gently on the lake while the cool night breeze moved through the trees. For several moments neither of them spoke. There was no awkwardness. Only quiet understanding. Finally, your soulmate sat beside them. I came as soon as I could. The other person smiled softly. I knew you would. Another peaceful silence followed before they quietly admitted, thank you for coming. Your soulmate looked toward the lake before asking the question that had been resting inside their heart. What decision were you talking about? The answer did not come immediately. Instead, the other person reached into a small shoulder bag and removed a folded notebook that looked worn from years of use. I think it's easier if I show you. My beloved child, they carefully opened the notebook. The first few pages contained ordinary thoughts, little reminders, favorite quotes, and reflections from different seasons of life. Then they stopped on one page where a sentence had been underlined several times. The hardest decision isn't choosing between two paths. It's choosing between fear and honesty. Your soulmate quietly read those words again. The other person smiled sadly. I wrote that almost 2 years ago. You did? Yes, and tonight I finally realized I've been choosing fear for much longer than I admitted. Listen carefully because this story is for you. They slowly turned another page. Across the top was written, "Things I never had the courage to say." Beneath it were paragraphs filled with gratitude. They described moments your soulmate had probably forgotten completely. The afternoon they stayed late just to listen after a difficult day. The unexpected message that arrived during a lonely season. The gentle encouragement that quietly rebuilt confidence. The simple habit of asking, "How are you really doing?" instead of accepting the easy answer. Your soulmate felt tears slowly gathering. "I never knew you remembered these." The reply came gently. "I remembered every one of them." Don't scroll, because the conversation became even more meaningful. "I've been carrying this notebook everywhere," the other person admitted. Why? Because every time I thought about making a major decision in life, I opened these pages first. What kind of decision? The answer surprised them. I was offered an opportunity to move across the country. Your soulmate remained silent. I almost accepted. The words hung quietly between them. I thought starting over somewhere new would finally silence everything I had been feeling. They looked down toward the notebook. But last night something happened. What happened? I realized changing my location wouldn't change the questions inside my heart. My beloved child, sometimes people believe distance will solve what only honesty can heal. Listen carefully because this story is for you. The other person continued. I spent hours asking myself why I couldn't simply move on. I tried making lists. I compared opportunities. I told myself it was the practical decision. But every time I imagined leaving, they appeared in every future I imagined. Your soulmate lowered their eyes. The quiet confession carried more sincerity than any dramatic declaration ever could. I finally understood that I wasn't afraid of moving. I was afraid of leaving without ever thanking the person who changed me. Those words filled the peaceful night with emotion. Don't scroll. Your heart needs this right now because your soulmate quietly reached into their own coat pocket. I almost brought you something tonight too. They carefully unfolded the piece of paper they had found earlier that evening. Across it were the familiar words. Never wait until goodbye to tell someone they mattered. The other person smiled through tears. I can't believe you still have that. I found it again tonight. They both laughed softly. Not because anything was funny, but because life had somehow placed the same lesson before both of them on the very same evening. Perhaps recently you've wondered whether timing really matters. My beloved child, this fictional story reminds us that sometimes people grow separately until they are finally ready for the same honest conversation. Growth cannot be rushed. Yet when it arrives, it often brings remarkable clarity. Listen carefully because this story is for you. The night grew quieter. The stars reflected across the lake. Neither of them felt pressured to hurry. Finally the other person spoke again. I haven't made my decision yet. You haven't? They slowly shook their head. No. I realized I couldn't choose my future while hiding the truth from someone who deserved to hear it. Your soulmate smiled gently. I'm glad you waited. So am I. For the first time that evening, peace replaced uncertainty. Yet, my beloved child, the biggest revelation still had not arrived. As they prepared to leave the park, the other person reached into the notebook one final time and removed a sealed envelope. Across the front were handwritten words that immediately captured your soulmate's attention. If I ever find the courage, please read this. They quietly placed the envelope into your soulmate's hands. I wrote this months ago. Why didn't you give it to me then? The answer came with complete honesty. Because I wasn't the person I needed to become yet. Your soulmate carefully looked at the unopened envelope. Somehow they already knew it contained more than words. It carried months of quiet reflection, unanswered questions, gratitude, and one truth that had remained hidden until this very night. And when that letter is finally opened, my beloved child, it will reveal the real reason behind the decision that almost changed both of their lives forever. Don't scroll, listen carefully because this fictional story is reaching the moment where hidden truths finally step into the light. Your heart needs this right now. My beloved child, your soulmate stood silently beneath the moonlit sky with the sealed envelope resting gently in their hands. The peaceful lake reflected thousands of tiny stars, while the cool breeze carried the quiet sound of leaves moving through the trees. Everything around them seemed calm, yet inside their heart emotions were rising like waves. They looked down at the handwritten words across the front of the envelope once again. If I ever find the courage, please read this. They realized this letter had existed for months, quietly waiting for the moment when fear would no longer control either of their lives. Slowly they looked up. Should I read it now? The answer came with a gentle smile. Yes. But promise me something first. What is it? Read every word with your heart before you answer with your voice. Your soulmate nodded quietly. They carefully opened the envelope, unfolded the neatly written pages, and began reading. The first sentence immediately captured every thought inside their mind. If this letter has finally reached your hands, then it means I stopped allowing fear to make decisions that honesty should have made long ago. They paused for a moment. The words felt strangely familiar because they reflected the very lesson both of them had been learning throughout this journey. Listen carefully because this story is for you. My beloved child, the letter continued. I've rewritten these pages more times than I can remember. Every version sounded incomplete because I kept trying to explain my feelings instead of explaining what truly changed me. Tonight I finally understand the difference. Your soulmate slowly turned the page. I didn't begin admiring you because life was perfect whenever you were around. I began admiring you because you remained kind even when life wasn't perfect. You treated people with respect when no one expected anything in return. You encouraged others without needing recognition. You apologized when you were wrong. You celebrated other people's victories as though they were your own. I quietly watched those moments. They changed me. My beloved child, tears slowly filled your soulmate's eyes. They had never imagined that ordinary acts of patience and kindness had been noticed so carefully. Don't scroll. Your heart needs this right now because the next paragraph answered a question that had remained hidden for years. There were many opportunities when I almost told you everything. I almost spoke after that long walk beside the river. I almost spoke after the afternoon we spent helping at the community center. I almost spoke after you reminded me not to measure my worth by one difficult chapter. But every time I remained silent. Not because my feelings weren't real. Because I believed I still had growing to do. Those words settled gently into the silence surrounding the lake. Your soulmate lowered the pages and whispered softly. I wish I had known. The answer came kindly. I know. But if we had spoken then, we would have been trying to build something before we were ready to protect it. Listen carefully because this story is for you. My beloved child, they continued reading. Life taught me lessons I could never have learned any other way. It taught me patience. It taught me humility. It taught me that real love isn't about asking another person to complete you. It's about becoming someone capable of protecting another person's peace. Those words remained in your soulmate's heart long after they finished reading them. For years they had believed love was mostly about emotion. Tonight they discovered it was equally about character. Perhaps recently you've reflected on the qualities that matter most in meaningful relationships. My beloved child, admiration grows deeper when it is rooted in trust, kindness, honesty, and mutual growth rather than excitement alone. Those quiet qualities often become the strongest foundation any relationship can have. Don't scroll, because the most surprising part of the letter was still waiting. Near the final page, another section had been written in different handwriting. Your soulmate looked up with confusion. What's this? The other person smiled. My grandmother wrote that. Carefully they began reading. If you're both reading these words together someday, then life has already answered one important question. What question? Whether your connection helped both of you become better people. If the answer is yes, never forget that relationships built upon character deserve conversations before conclusions. Your soulmate looked toward them with quiet emotion. You showed this letter to your grandmother? They nodded. Months ago. What did she say? The answer came with a peaceful smile. She told me something I've never forgotten. What was it? Don't choose the person who simply makes today exciting. Choose the person whose influence makes tomorrow wiser. Those words echoed through the stillness of the night. My beloved child, both of them realized they had spent years becoming exactly the people those words described. Listen carefully because this story is for you. The letter reached its final paragraph. I haven't made my decision yet. Not because I'm uncertain about you. But because I want the decision we make next to be built upon complete honesty. If my future changes tomorrow, I don't want it to change because I was running from my feelings. I want it to change because we both chose truth. Whatever happens after tonight, thank you for helping me become someone I'm proud to be. Your soulmate folded the letter slowly. There was no dramatic speech. Only peaceful silence. Then they quietly admitted something they had carried for far too long. I almost came here tonight just to say goodbye before you made your decision. The other person looked surprised. Really? They nodded. I thought if I stayed silent one more time, it would hurt less. They both smiled gently. It would have hurt for years. Yes. It would have. Don't scroll. Your heart needs this right now because they remained sitting together on the old wooden bench, watching gentle ripples move across the water. No one rushed the conversation. No one searched for perfect words. Sometimes healing arrives through quiet understanding rather than dramatic declarations. Finally, the other person looked toward your soulmate and softly asked, "Do you know why I needed you tonight before making that decision?" Your soulmate slowly shook their head. The answer came with complete sincerity. "Because I realized no major decision should be made while an important truth is still waiting to be spoken." Those words became the turning point of the evening. Fear had finally lost its voice. Honesty had finally found its own. But, my beloved child, this fictional story has one final chapter waiting. As they prepared to leave the lakeside park together, the other person received an unexpected phone call. They answered quietly. After listening for only a few moments, they looked toward your soulmate with astonishment. "The decision I thought I had to make." They paused. "It doesn't have to be made tonight anymore." Everything had suddenly changed. Yet the greatest surprise was not the phone call itself. It was discovering that the urgent decision had quietly led both of them toward the conversation they should have shared long before fear convinced them to remain silent. And in the final chapter, they will discover that the greatest gift of the entire night was never avoiding one difficult decision. It was finding the courage to build every future decision upon honesty, gratitude, patience, and the quiet strength of two hearts that had finally learned to speak the truth. Don't scroll, listen carefully because this fictional story has finally reached its final chapter. Your heart needs this right now. My beloved child, after the unexpected phone call ended, neither of them spoke for several moments. The peaceful lake remained still beneath the moonlight, while the gentle wind carried away the fear that had quietly controlled both hearts for far too long. Your soulmate searched their face, trying to understand what had just happened. Finally, with a deep breath, the other person smiled, a smile unlike any they had seen before. It wasn't a smile of excitement. It was the smile of someone who had finally put down a burden they had carried for years. "The decision I thought I had to make," they said softly, "doesn't have to be made tonight anymore." Your soulmate looked at them with quiet curiosity. "What changed?" "The opportunity one told you about, the one that would have taken me far away." They paused. "It has been postponed." The words settled gently into the silence. "For months I believed life was forcing me to choose immediately. Tonight I discovered I still have time." Your soulmate quietly smiled. "Then maybe tonight wasn't about making a decision." The other person nodded. "No. It was about making sure fear wasn't making it for me." Listen carefully because this story is for you. My beloved child, they remained sitting together beneath the stars long after midnight. There was no rush anymore. The urgency that had filled the beginning of the night had quietly disappeared, replaced by something much stronger, clarity. For the first time in years, both of them felt free to speak honestly without worrying about saying the perfect thing. They began talking about the journey that had quietly shaped them while life carried them through different seasons. "I spent so much time trying to become successful," one of them admitted. "And did it make you happy?" your soulmate asked. "It gave me achievements." "But happiness?" They smiled thoughtfully. "Happiness always seemed to arrive through people, never through accomplishments." Those words stayed suspended between them. My beloved child, sometimes life gently reminds us that careers, goals, and dreams are valuable, but they become even more meaningful when they are shared with people who inspire us to become better human beings. Don't scroll. Your heart needs this right now because the conversation slowly turned toward gratitude. "There are so many things I've never thanked you for," the other person whispered. "You don't have to." "I do." They continued. Thank you for encouraging me when I doubted myself. Thank you for treating me with respect during seasons when I couldn't even respect myself. Thank you for reminding me that one difficult chapter never defines an entire life. Thank you for never making kindness look weak. Every sentence brought quiet tears to your soulmate's eyes. Finally they smiled and replied. Then let me thank you too. The other person looked surprised. You taught me patience. You taught me that listening is often more powerful than speaking. You reminded me that people grow at different speeds. And without realizing it, you helped me become someone I'm proud to be. For several moments neither of them said another word. The silence itself had become part of the conversation. Listen carefully because this story is for you. My beloved child. After a while they began walking slowly around the lake. Every familiar path reminded them of old memories that no longer carried regret. Instead, those memories now carried gratitude. They laughed about simple conversations from years earlier. They remembered rainy afternoons, quiet cafes, long walks, handwritten notes, forgotten birthdays that somehow became unforgettable, and moments they had once believed were too ordinary to matter. I've realized something, your soulmate quietly said. What? We spent years believing we needed one dramatic sign. The other person smiled. And? The real signs were always there. They were hidden inside everyday kindness. Those words felt like the final piece of a puzzle both hearts had been assembling for years. Don't scroll, because something beautiful happened next. As they reached the old wooden bridge crossing the lake, they noticed an elderly couple sitting quietly together watching the stars. The older gentleman gently adjusted the blanket around his wife's shoulders. She smiled and rested her hand in his. Neither spoke. They simply enjoyed the peaceful moment together. Your soulmate watched quietly before whispering. That's beautiful. The other person nodded. I think that's what lasting love really looks like. Not constant excitement, but consistent care. Those simple words carried more wisdom than any grand speech. My beloved child, perhaps recently you've wondered what truly makes meaningful relationships endure. This fictional story gently reminds us that lasting love is rarely built upon dramatic moments alone. It grows through daily choices, respect instead of pride, patience instead of frustration, understanding instead of assumptions, gratitude instead of silence. Listen carefully because this story is for you. As dawn slowly approached, the sky began changing from deep blue to soft shades of gold. The first birds welcomed the morning. Your soulmate quietly reached into their bag and removed the old notebook one final time. They opened the last empty page. This page has been waiting, they smiled. For what? For today. Together they wrote a new promise. We will never allow fear to speak louder than honesty. We will never assume people already know they matter. We will express gratitude while there is still time. We will protect one another's peace. We will continue growing, even when growth becomes uncomfortable. We will choose kindness on ordinary days, because ordinary days become extraordinary memories. After writing those words, they both signed their names beneath the promises. Then your soulmate gently closed the notebook forever. Not because the journey had ended, but because everything that truly mattered no longer belonged on paper. It belonged in the way they chose to live. Don't scroll, your heart needs this right now because before leaving the park, the other person looked toward your soulmate and quietly said, do you know what the biggest decision really was? Your soulmate smiled. It wasn't whether to move. It wasn't whether to stay. It wasn't even whether to tell the truth. The answer came softly. The biggest decision was choosing the kind of person I wanted to become before choosing the future I wanted to build. Those words became the greatest lesson of the night. Because they understood something they had missed for years. Important decisions become clearer when our character becomes stronger. My beloved child, as they walked back toward the parking area together, the rising sun filled the sky with warm light. The darkness that had surrounded the beginning of the story had quietly disappeared. So had the fear. The urgent night that seemed filled with uncertainty had transformed into a peaceful morning filled with understanding. The decision that was almost made in silence had instead become the conversation that changed everything. Not because every question had been answered, but because both hearts had finally chosen honesty before regret. And that became the true ending of this fictional journey. It was never really about stopping one difficult decision. It was about discovering that no important choice should ever be made while gratitude remains unspoken, respect remains hidden, or truth remains locked inside the heart. My beloved child, if this story leaves you with one lesson, let it be this: never underestimate the quiet power of an honest conversation. A few sincere words spoken with kindness can prevent years of unanswered questions. Appreciate people while they can still hear your gratitude. Encourage them while they still need hope. Listen before judging. Forgive before bitterness grows. And never allow fear to make decisions that love, wisdom, and honesty were always meant to guide. As the morning sun rose completely above the horizon, they smiled at one another, not because life had suddenly become perfect, but because they finally understood that the greatest peace comes when we stop hiding from the truth. Side by side, they walked toward a new day, carrying no perfect promises, only a shared commitment to keep choosing compassion, gratitude, patience, and honesty every ordinary day that followed. That became the real miracle of the night, and the beginning of every tomorrow that came after.